You know that feeling of being stuck between a rock and a hard place, where no matter what you choose, it feels like the wrong choice? Yeah, those aren't just tough decisions. We're talking about moral dilemmas. And they force us to question everything we think we know about right and wrong. So let's dive right into this fascinating and, yeah, often impossible world. Okay, so to really get a grip on what we're talking about, let's walk through a pretty classic high-stakes scenario. Picture this: a doctor, a patient, and a family, all caught in what feels like a truly impossible situation. So, just imagine for a second you're the one who has to make the call, and you know deep down that whatever you decide, you're going to have to break a major moral rule. There's just no easy way out of this. So, on one side, you've got your patient. This person is facing the end of their life, and their one request to you, their doctor, is for privacy. They're basically begging you to honor your duty of confidentiality. You know, that secret trust between a doctor and patient. And then on the other side, there's the family. They're desperate, they're confused, and they are pleading with you for the whole truth. They need to prepare themselves emotionally, to say their goodbyes, to just be there for each other. They're pulling on your sense of honesty and compassion. And this is the real heart of the problem. You have a very real moral duty to both of them. The duty to keep a promise is crashing head-on with the duty to be honest and prevent more suffering. You literally can't do both. That is what makes this a real dilemma. So you might be wondering, what actually separates a situation like our doctors from just, a really hard decision? Well, philosophically, there's a real distinction, and it's super important to understand. Right. A true moral dilemma isn't about choosing between a good option and a bad one. It's when you're forced to pick between two different rights. You have two duties, both are morally important, but there's just no way to follow both of them at the same time. And this is a really great way to see the difference. Look, choosing a career path, that's a difficult choice. It's based on your own preferences, on strategy, but a moral dilemma, that's a whole different beast. It's about conflicting moral duties that just can't be squared. It's not about what's best for you personally. It's about what's fundamentally right when both options feel wrong. Okay, so how in the world do you even start to tackle something that seems totally unsolvable? Well, for centuries, philosophers have been building frameworks to help us out. You can think of them like a toolkit for taking apart these impossible choices. Let's open it up and look at the three big ones. All right, first tool in the box, the rule-based approach. The name kind of gives it away, right? This one is all about duties and universal laws. The basic idea is that some actions are just plain right or wrong, no matter what happens as a result. The big name you hear with this is Immanuel Kant. His whole thing was that we should only do things that we'd be okay with everyone doing all the time, like a universal law. So for a deontologist, rules are everything. Don't lie, period. It's an absolute. So how does this help our doctor? Well, it kind of doesn't, actually. What it does is highlight the problem perfectly. See, the doctor has a rule, maintain confidentiality, but she also has another rule, be honest. Deontology is great at showing us the clash, but it doesn't give us a rule for breaking the rules. It leaves us stuck between two competing absolutes. Okay, let's grab another tool. This next one, the outcome-based approach, completely flips the script. It basically says, forget the rules for a second, what really matters are the results. This is the big idea behind something called utilitarianism. The thinking is simple. Just add up all the potential good and bad that could come from each choice. Then you pick the option that creates the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. Easy, right? Well, could our doctor use this? I mean, she could try, but man, it gets complicated fast. How do you measure the good of the patient's peace of mind against the good of the family's ability to prepare? It's almost impossible to calculate. And you run a huge risk of just treating people's feelings and rights like they're numbers on a spreadsheet. And that brings us to our third and final tool, which takes a totally different path. It shifts the focus away from rules and results and instead looks at the character of the person making the choice. The question isn't, what should I do? It's, what kind of person should I be? This idea goes way, way back to thinkers like Aristotle. The goal here is to develop good character traits, or virtues, like compassion, justice, and wisdom. The thinking is that if you're a virtuous person, you'll just kind of know the right thing to do when you're in a tough spot. So for our doctor, the question becomes, what would a truly compassionate and just doctor do right now? And that's a really powerful way to look at it, for sure. But it also has its limits. It doesn't give you a simple A or B answer, especially when the virtue of compassion is pulling you in two different directions, towards the patient and towards the family. Okay, so let's pull all that together. This is a perfect summary of what we've been talking about. You can see how these three massive ethical frameworks look at the very same problem through totally different lenses. Deontology, it sees a clash of rules. Consequentialism, it sees a math problem. And virtue ethics, it sees a test of character. So I know what you might be thinking. If none of these fancy frameworks gives us a clean answer, what's the point? And that's a fair question. But here's the thing. The point isn't to find an easy answer. The whole point is the struggle itself. The very act of wrestling with these impossible choices is what actually matters. Yeah, there's this great quote I came across. It really gets to the heart of it. Dilemmas aren't some kind of bug in our moral programming. They're a feature. They are the moments that force us to go deeper, to question what we believe, and ultimately, to grow. And you can actually see this amazing ripple effect. It starts with one person, right? We wrestle with a problem, and it forces us to think. Then, on a bigger scale, all that thinking helps sharpen our ethical ideas. And eventually, our collective struggle with these hard questions ends up shaping the actual laws and rules we all live by. So, what do we get out of all this? Well, think of it like this. Tackling these dilemmas is like a workout for your moral muscles. It sharpens your judgment, it boosts your critical thinking skills, and it gives you a much-needed dose of humility. And as a whole society, we only evolve by having these tough conversations about really big stuff, like end-of-life care or how we share resources. It's how we build a better future together. So, at the end of the day, there's no answer key for this stuff. Moral dilemmas aren't a test you can pass or fail. They're more like an invitation to really think, to engage that moral compass we all have. Their job isn't to give us the right answer, but to force us to ask better questions. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you have to choose, and there is no right choice, what are you going to do?